finished with 399 home runs, not 400. One short of the number baseball mythology loves to frame on a wall. He never won a Most Valuable Player award. He played in exactly one World Series in 22 seasons. By every modern measure, Kaline should be a footnote. Instead, Ted Williams, the man most historians call the greatest hitter who ever lived, said Kaline was the finest right-handed hitter in the American League. So before the records and the gold gloves, we need to ask the only question that matters. Who was this man, really, and why will there never be another one like him? Albert William Kaline was born into on December 19, 1934. When the boy was 8 years old, something happened that would define every single step he ever took on a baseball field. Doctors diagnosed him with osteomyelitis, a chronic infection of the bone. They operated on his left foot and removed approximately 2 inches of bone. What they left behind was a permanent deformity. The toes on his left foot were swept back at a sharp angle. Only 2 of them touched the ground when he walked. When he ran for a living, he ran on the heel and the outer edge of his left foot and the toes and heel of his right. For the first 12 years of his professional career, every single game was played through pain that never fully went away. In an era when athletes were beginning to learn the leverage of public suffering, Kaline said nothing. He did not seek sympathy. He did not use the condition as an explanation when things went wrong. He simply played game after game, season after season, on a foot that had been partially carved away before he was old enough to understand what that meant. His father, his uncles, and his grandfather had all been catchers on semi-professional teams across Maryland. Baseball was the family language. Across the street from the Kaline home, factory workers held pickup games at lunch. They were always short a player or two. The kid standing under the trees was always willing. They would say, "Come on, play," Kaline recalled years later. And he played. Every time, on a foot that hurt with every step. This is where the story begins, not in a stadium, but on a cracked sidewalk in South Baltimore, where a boy with a broken foot decided, without drama or announcement, that pain was simply part of the cost. Ed Catalinas had been watching. The Detroit Tiger scout had spent months cultivating a relationship with the Kaline family. He attended every high school game. He sat in the bleachers at Southern High School in Baltimore and watched this lean, quiet teenager do things with a baseball that made grown men stop talking. The arm alone was extraordinary. At one tryout, officials asked Kaline to throw again because they assumed the measurement was wrong. He threw again. The number was the same. Every major league team wanted him. Every one. But Catalinas had gotten there first, and when Kaline graduated in the spring of 1953, the Tigers signed him to a contract worth $35,000. Catalinas would later describe Kaline as the prospect that a scout creates in his mind and then prays that someone will come along to fit the pattern. Kaline took the money and handed every dollar to his parents. The mortgage on the family home in South Baltimore was paid in full. His mother, whose eyesight had been failing for years, received the operation that saved her vision. The 18-year-old boy who had just signed a professional baseball contract kept nothing for himself. He boarded a train for Philadelphia. A rule at the time required any player receiving a large signing bonus to stay on the major league roster for 2 full seasons before going to the minors. Kaline knew the risk sitting on a big league bench could ruin a young hitter, but the family needed the money. So on June 25, 1953, he made his major league debut against the Philadelphia Athletics. 18 years old, never played a single inning of minor league baseball in his life. His first season was modest, but one small moment from that first year reveals everything about who Kaline was. He had been assigned uniform number 25. Before his second season, he approached a teammate and asked if he could have number 6 instead. Number 6 was the number worn by Stan Musial of the St. Louis Cardinals, the man Kaline had grown up admiring above all others. Not the highest number, not the most visible. The number that meant something to him personally, quietly, without explanation. He wore number 6 for the remaining 21 years of his career. 1955 began like any other season. Kaline was 20 years old. His salary was $9,000 a year. The Detroit Tigers were not expected to contend for anything significant, and their young right fielder was considered promising, but promising is a word baseball uses carefully because the distance between promising and great is littered with careers that never made the crossing. By September, that distance had collapsed entirely. Kaline finished the season hitting 340. He hit 27 home runs. And in doing so, he became the youngest player in the history of the American League to win a batting title at 20 years old, breaking a record that Ty Cobb had held for 48 years. Cobb had been 20 years and 12 days old when he won his first title in 1907. Kaline was 20 years and 12 days younger than that margin. The two men were separated by exactly 12 days of age. 12 days. In nearly half a century, no one had gotten closer. Ted Williams, who had his own complicated relationship with batting titles and with legacy, watched Kaline that summer and offered a verdict that carried more weight than any award. Williams was not a man who handed out praise without cause. When he looked at this 20-year-old from Baltimore and said, "In my book, he is the greatest right-handed hitter in the league," people listened. That same season, he became the youngest player ever to hit 3 home runs in a single game. The numbers arrived in a cascade, and yet none of it seemed to change him. He did not renegotiate his contract. He did not demand a larger role. He came back in the spring and went to work. The reporters who covered him described a young man who was difficult to read, not because he was arrogant, but because he was genuinely puzzled by what all the attention was about. He had broken Ty Cobb's record. He had earned the public praise of Ted Williams. He was 20 years old, and he wore number 6 because he admired Stan Musial. What most people did not know, what Kaline himself never mentioned, was that every step he took on that field still hurt. The foot that had been partially carved away when he was 8 years old had not healed. It would not heal for another 10 years. The batting title had been won on a foot that doctors said should have ended his athletic career before it began. For 13 seasons, Kaline was the Detroit Tigers. He won Gold Gloves. He made all-star rosters. He played right field with a precision that made veteran pitchers exhale when they saw him warming up behind them. But he had never played in a World. By the summer of 1967, Detroit had a legitimate chance. The Tigers were in a 4-team race for the American League pennant that went all the way to the final week of the season. Kaline was 32 years old. He understood, with the clarity that only accumulating years can provide, that windows like this one do not stay open forever. On June 27, 1967, he struck out against Sam McDowell of Cleveland. He walked back to the dugout. And then, in a moment that he would describe for the rest of his life as the single worst decision he ever made, he slammed his bat against the bat rack and fractured a finger on his right hand. He missed the next 26 games. The Tigers finished the season in second place, 1 game behind the Boston Red Sox, 1 game. Kaline did not hide from what he had done. He said, "I wanted to do so much to help the ball club. I did not do my job. I was very embarrassed about the whole thing afterwards." He called it the dumbest thing I ever did. Full stop. No elaboration. He owned it completely, and he carried it. The following spring, Kaline arrived knowing that 1968 might be his final genuine opportunity. The Tigers were built to win. And then, on May 25th, a pitch from Lou Krause of the Oakland Athletics broke the bone in his right forearm. Gone for 5 weeks. When he came back, something had shifted. The outfield that had filled in Mickey Stanley in center, Jim Northrup in right, Willie Horton in left had played so well that there was no obvious place for Kaline in the starting lineup. He was 33 years old. He was a Hall of Fame talent sitting on a bench, watching younger men play the positions he had owned for over a decade. The World Series was approaching, and for a brief, terrifying stretch of that summer, it looked like Kaline might watch it from the dugout. Manager Mayo Smith had a problem with no clean solution. He had 4 outfielders who deserved to start. One of them had to sit, and the one with the most legitimate historical claim to a starting spot, the man who had been the face of the franchise for 16 years, was the one with the least recent playing time due to injury. Smith did something that had never been done before in the history of the World Series. He moved Mickey Stanley, a center fielder who had never played shortstop at any level of professional baseball, not in the minors, not in a single regular season game, to shortstop. This opened a spot for Kaline in the outfield. The math was reasonable. The execution was terrifying. When Kaline heard about the plan, his first reaction was not gratitude. It was concern for his teammate. He said, "I do not think there has ever been a decision like that made in the history of baseball, where you bring in an outfielder to play shortstop in the World Series." Mickey decided to do it, and I am forever thankful to him, because I do not know whether I would have been able to play on a regular basis had he turned it down. The man being given the opportunity is publicly crediting the man who made it possible. This is who Kaline was. The St. Louis Cardinals won 3 of the first 4 games. The Tigers were 1 loss away from elimination when Game 5 began at Tiger Stadium on October 9, 1968. The Cardinals led 3-2 in the 7th inning. Detroit had runners on base. 16 seasons of waiting were compressed into that half inning. Kaline stepped to the plate with the bases loaded. He hit a single into the outfield. 2 runs scored. Detroit took the lead and never surrendered it. The Tigers won Game 5, they won Game 6, they won Game 7 on the road in St. Louis. When it was over, the manager of the Cardinals, Red Schoendienst, said, "You know what the turning point in the series was? It was Kaline carrying them all along with him. That is what beat us. The man who almost did not play, the man who deferred credit to his teammate. He finished with a batting average of 379, 2 home runs, and 8 runs driven in. The only World Series of his career. 3 years after the World Series, the Detroit Tigers offered Kaline a raise. Not just any raise. The contract would have made him the first player in franchise history to earn $100,000 in a single season. At a time when that number represented genuine elite status, the Tigers handed him the offer and waited. Kaline said no. He told the front office that he had not earned it. His 1970 season had been, by his own accounting, a subpar performance. The raise was not deserved. He would wait. He said, "I would prefer to get that much money when I rate it." In 1971, he hit 294 and finished among the American League's best. He accepted the contract that off-season after he felt he had earned it. No professional athlete in the modern era would do this. The idea of declining a pay increase because of a personal sense of unworthiness is so foreign to contemporary sports culture that it reads almost like fiction. But it happened. This refusal to accept more than what he believed he deserved runs through every notable moment of his career. When the Tigers retired his number 6, he was the first player in franchise history to receive that honor. He called his Hall of Fame induction the proudest moment of his life. And then he said, the man with 3,007 hits and 10 gold gloves, that he had been shocked when he learned he had been elected. Shocked. He finished with 399 home runs, not 400. He had actually hit that milestone once in 1958, but a rainout erased the game from the official record. And on the final day of his career, with 400 still within reach, he left the game early, walking away with at-bats remaining, without explanation, without ceremony. He played because he loved the game. When he was done, he stopped. After the playing career ended, Kaline stayed. He became a color commentator on Tigers broadcasts for 27 years. Then he joined the front office as a special assistant, mentoring young outfielders, lending his eyes and his knowledge to an organization that had been his home since he was 18 years old. He was still doing that work when he died on April 6, 2020, at the age of 85, 67 years, one team, one city. Behind the old Tiger Stadium, there is a street called Kaline Drive. The city named it in his honor in 1970 while he was still an active player, still showing up every day on a foot rebuilt by surgery before he was old enough to pitch in Little League. Now go back to the beginning. 399 home runs, no Most Valuable Player award, 1 World Series. By the metrics that define greatness in sports, Kaline falls just short in almost every column. And yet Ted Williams called him the finest right-handed hitter in the league. And yet a city named a street after him before he retired. And yet 67 years passed and the Detroit Tigers organization never stopped finding a reason to keep him close. The answer is not in the statistics. It is in the boy who had bone carved from his foot and never told anyone it hurt. The teenager who handed every signing dollar to his parents. The veteran who called his worst moment the dumbest thing he ever did and moved on without excuses. The star who told his manager not to bench a teammate just to make room for him. There will never be another Kaline, not because the numbers cannot be matched, they can. What cannot be replicated is that particular combination of talent and character and quiet, unannounced decency.